Hey yo, welcome back everybody. And today we're going to be covering a pretty, confusing topic in PokeRogue, which is going to be DNA splicing. And I want to go and forewarn you, if my voice starts cracking a little bit during this, it's because I'm trying to lose my voice. But that's okay, because we've only picked the most perplexing topic of PokeRogue to cover, so I'm sure I won't have to talk too much about it. So understanding how DNA splicing works is extremely important, because it is kind of confusing until you get a good grasp on it. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can completely ruin your endless run thousands of levels in, and it's just a terrible feeling to know that just one simple mistake ruined hours of hard work. And you can't really just refresh out of it, because once you DNA splice, it kind of just jumps to the next level and the game saves, and so you're kind of just stuck with what you did, and sometimes you just can't recover from that. So I'm going to try to break this down into a way that makes it pretty simple and easy to understand. We're just going to cover just what DNA splicers are, what the idea of it is, and how to get your hands on one, and then kind of just how the actual mechanics of it works. And then we're going to look at some good combinations, how to really utilize it, and then I'm going to show you a little bit of real world experience of just me completely decimating Eternatus on Endless with a really broken build that he can't even touch. So before we get into that, I just want to say that we just recently hit 1,000 subs, and I want to thank everybody that's been watching my videos and, subscribing and everything. It really means a lot. It's really helping me out. And I also just want to go ahead and mention that if you haven't subscribed yet, and you would like to do that, the like and sub would really appreciate it. And there's also Discord and Twitch links down below, so if you'd like to see any of my challenge runs on PokeRogue or just talk about it with some cool people, feel free to join that, no pressure. It's completely your decision. But without further ado, we're going to jump into this and kind of just start taking a look at how this stuff works. So first off, we're just going to look at what the heck is a DNA splicer? How do you get one? I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you have played the game for hours and not even seen one, because as you can see here, it is already a master tier item, which means without any luck or anything, it's a 0.1% chance of even getting a master tier. And then to take it a step further, if you get a master tier, there's only a 22.22% chance of it even being a DNA splicer. So for those of you who aren't really good at math and don't feel like mathing, that's basically less than a 0.02% chance of getting one without any increased luck. Now, you can kind of manipulate this if you get your hands on a luck capsule, and especially if you're in Endless where you can just get tons of money and you can just lock in a master item or even something lower and just reroll for millions until you eventually get one. You can kind of just be rolling in them by the time you're getting into like the thousands. Now, that also means your chances of running into one in Classic is basically almost zero, but it's okay because it's not really that useful in Classic mode. The only reason why you really want one is because once you beat Classic mode with something spliced in your party, you unlock Endless like the Endless mode that is spliced. I'm not even sure what to call it, I guess Endless Spliced, but that just sounds weird. But that mode allows you to just start off with a bunch of spliced Pokemon, and everything you battle is spliced, and you get more DNA splicers in it. It's wacky, it's really hard to keep track of, and I absolutely love it. But anyways, we're going to move on into the rest of the wiki here and just kind of take a look at how it actually works. So when you DNA splice, you're going to combine two Pokemon. That's kind of obvious, I think most people already knew that. But the way it's going to work is the first Pokemon's base stats, or I guess the base stats of both Pokemon, are going to combine and average. So in the example here, they have Manaphy and Fion having 180 base stats. And when you fuse them, the base stats of the fused Pokemon is going to be 90 on everything, because, that's how their stats work. So the problem with this is it can kind of cause really bad combinations if you fuse things that don't really go together. So you want to avoid combining like a strong physical attacker and a strong special attacker, because you're just going to get something that's really bad at everything. But you also don't want to take your fast attacker and combine it with something slow, because you could just make a really good attack Pokemon that doesn't get to go first and it just dies before it does anything. So once you actually fuse your Pokemon, you're going to have the chance to pick the 4 moves to learn from the sacrifice Pokemon, and so your first Pokemon is going to be your actual base Pokemon. The second one is going to be sacrificed to give some different buffs or abilities and stuff to the base one, and you're going to get to immediately learn the 4 moves that that Pokemon knows. But you're also going to pick up any of its moves that it learns while leveling up, and you also get access to TM moves, and if you use a memory mushroom, you can learn any move that it would have learned before. So you're basically combining the move pools of these Pokemon. And if you desplice, you're going to or unsplice, I guess is what the game calls it, you're actually going to be able to keep those moves. And so this can start getting into more complex things where you can actually start combining multiple move pools to just create a monster that has the exact moves that you want it to have. Another thing to note is when you fuse them, they will combine all of their held items. This is both good and bad, because the issue with this is that, let's say you have the max number of, I don't know, multi-lens on both Pokemon, and you fuse them together. You're going to lose half of your multi-lens because you can only have that max number. It's not going to double your maximum. So you have to be careful about that. You might want to transfer any important items off of them before you fuse them if it's going to go over that max limit. You don't want to lose really good stuff just because you weren't paying attention. That has definitely happened to me before. Another thing to note is the order that you pick your Pokemon in is very important, because once you unsplice, the second Pokemon you chose is going to disappear forever. And besides that, the way that their stats combined is going to be determined by which one you chose first and which one was second. So the first Pokemon is going to keep its first or only type. So basically, if it's a Fairy Steel, it's going to keep its Fairy type. The second Pokemon is going to give it its second or only type. So if it's a Fire Flying, it's going to give Flying type. If it's only a Fire, it's going to give that Fire type. And then your first Pokemon is also going to keep its passive ability if you have that unlocked, which can become very important when you're trying to make really broken builds. The main ability of the second Pokemon is going to get passed over as well. So you're going to lose the ability off the first Pokemon, but you're going to get the one from the second, which again is going to be very important moving forward. And then the IV, natures, and level of the first Pokemon is going to be what you keep. And then as far as luck goes, it kind of just combines them together, so that's not super important, except that it allows you to get an obscene amount of luck with only a few Pokemon if you start combining a bunch of shinies together. So another thing to note is Mega Stones and like Giganamushrooms or whatever they're called can not be used post-fusion on the secondary Pokemon. They can be used on the first one that you chose. But if you Mega Evolve or Giga Evolve, I guess, the second Pokemon before you fuse them, you can still get those bonuses and the abilities and stuff from it. Just make sure you're careful about that, because some Pokemon might have an ability on their Mega form that you don't want to pass over. Maybe you wanted the base form instead, so just make sure you pay attention to that before you fuse them. Another thing to note is that you do get candy for both Pokemon that are fused together as you use them. It's just going to be half value, so you're going to get candy for both of them at half the rate. So it can be helpful if you're trying to, grind up candies for two different Pokemon at the same time, and you just got a lot of time to kill. So the wiki does give a really good example here, and I'm not going to talk through it because I feel like it's just going to get more confusing if I try to explain it to you like that. But looking at it will probably explain it well enough, so if you'd like to pause the video here and just kind of look through it, or you can just go to the wiki yourself. Either way, it's there for you, and it's a really good example. I just feel like it's going to be word spaghetti if I try to explain it to you without, a real example. And I would like to note, I was actually going to include a bunch of real examples in this with different combinations and everything, but again, with the DNA splicers being so rare, I tried for so long and did not get enough to really do anything with it. So I apologize, but the game does not like me enough to let me show that to you. Alright, so now that we've got that kind of a rough explanation out of the way, you might be wondering, alright, so how do I actually use this? So there's some kind of different ways you can do it, and some of them take less thought than others. So your basic way of doing it is just, hey, I'd like to modify my stats, maybe get a better ability or something, but maybe just really increase my move pool. So you've got something like Mega Alakazam, who is just an amazing Pokemon, really good special attack, really good speed, Trace is a pretty good ability, but his move pool without the egg moves is kind of lacking. Like with egg moves, it's like, alright, that's pretty decent, but let's say you don't have those. And so this is his level up move pool. You got Psychic, and that's it. I mean, you got like Recover, which is normal type, I guess, but it doesn't do any damage. So you have Psychic. And he's got some TMs, which, you can't always rely on getting, but even most of those are just Psychic, and then you get down into the others and it's like, alright, here's a bunch of normal attacks that you don't really care about. Here's an Ice move, but it's physical. You get Energy Ball, that's pretty decent. And then you get like Shadow Ball, which is alright, that's pretty good. But, I mean, there's not a whole lot going on here. I mean, Charge Beam's good, but that's good for a different reason. It's not going to do a whole lot of damage on its own. And especially in Endless, you may not be able to get those buffs up before you just die to something. So a Charge Beam with 50 damage is not going to be that great. So how do you solve that problem? Well, you could fuse him with something like maybe a Mega Gengar. Mega Gengar's got a decently better move pool, and his stats are slightly lower, but it's going to give you a little bit more variety, and his stats are still high enough that he's still going to be really good. And so it really wouldn't matter which one you choose as your second. I would probably take Mega Alakazam as the secondary, because then you're going to get Trace, which is infinitely better than Mega Gengar's Shadow Tag in Endless when nothing switches out anyways. But that's just a kind of a really basic way that you could do it. And then if you want to take it like one step further and go into something that's really going to benefit from the ability, is you could do like a physical combination of like Mega Blaziken and Mega Lucario. So Mega Lucario is pretty good, I mean, I wouldn't say he's busted or anything, but he's pretty good. But the big thing that you'd like is adaptability. So getting that extra boost to moves of the same type can just really give you a big power boost. And Mega Blaziken does get speed boost, which is pretty good on its own. But if you're already got a lot of speed built up and you're already relatively fast, you might not need the extra speed boost. You could even go with something like maybe a Jolly Nature to make you a little bit faster, and then grab adaptability to just do tons more damage. So something like that would be really good, and you're kind of mixing up your move pool a little bit, which again, in this case is not going to be as amazing as the last one because, you know, Mega Blaziken already has a decent move pool to begin with, but it's still pretty good. So while we're on the topic of talking about abilities, like, you know, adaptability and stuff, let's take a look at some other really funny combinations you could do, and this is kind of gimmicky, but let's take something like Chien-Pao, I think that's how you say it. So I already kind of like his ability anyways, but it's not amazing by any means, it's just pretty good. And he's a Dark Ice type, which can be kind of rough, you know, a single fighting move is just going to decimate you. But let's say you take this Chien-Pao and you combine him with Shedinja. So now you're a Dark Ghost type with Wonder Guard, which, if you don't know, makes it where only super effective moves can hit you. So let's jump over here real quick, and we're on the Pokemon type calculator. And so let's go ahead and just combine Dark and Ghost. And we'll see here, you can now only be hurt by Fairy type moves. Which, I know a lot of Pokemon get Fairy type moves, but it's still pretty easy to avoid. Now, you might run into a little bit of an issue, because once you get combined with Wonder Guard, you automatically have 1 HP. But you can kind of avoid the whole dying from weather effects and stuff just by using Chien-Pao's weather attacks. I mean, you could get, where is it at? Snowscape. So if you're fast enough, you could just put up snow. I guess it really doesn't matter if you're fast enough or not, because the weather effect doesn't hurt you till the end of the turn. So say there's a sandstorm up, you just turn it into snow, and now you don't die. So it's a pretty easy way to just avoid that weakness, and 99% of the time, you're not going to be able to die. Your stats aren't going to be amazing, but it really doesn't matter if you can just do chip damage infinitely until whatever you're fighting is dead, and you're basically immortal. Now, let's say you don't want to use weather abilities, because that stuff's just way too much hassle for you. Understandable, I'm lazy as well. So instead, let's take Eternal Floette, and let's say you have the passive ability for it, which is Magic Guard. So you're not going to take damage from anything that isn't a direct attack. So status effects aren't going to hurt you, weather effects aren't going to hurt you. That's pretty decent on its own. Eternal Floette's not super amazing by any means, but when you give it Wonder Guard and the Ghost typing, we get just a little bit more amazing, because now we're Fairy Ghost, and your only weaknesses are going to be Ghost and Steel type, which is not super common. I mean, it's, you know, still 2 more types, but Fairy, in my experience, is a lot more common of a move to run into, whereas Ghost and Steel is a little bit more predictable. A lot of Pokemon get Fairy moves, like everything's busting out with Play Rough, but usually you can tell if something's going to have a Ghost or a Steel type attack. So pretty easy to avoid, you don't have to throw up weather effects, you're basically immortal unless you run into the rare case of getting hit with Steel or Ghost. So other good abilities that you could pass on to something would be things like Sturdy, Unnerve, Prankster. So things like that are really going to help with any kind of damage over time on Eternatus. So Sturdy is going to guarantee that you're alive for 1 turn, which can let you get off 1, maybe 2, you know, setup moves or something like that if you're fast enough to outspeed him, or if you have a Quick Claw, or, you know, 4. So Pokemon like Nacli, he's already really good because he already has Sturdy, but maybe you want a whole team of Pokemon with Sturdy. Well, just fuse all of them with Nacli, or something else that gets Sturdy. Nacli's a really good example because he also gets Salt Cure. So you could give Sturdy and Salt Cure to, whatever Pokemon you want to have it, which we're going to get to in just a second. But things like Unnerve are great. They stop the opponents from using berries, which can be extremely annoying in Classic and Endless. And Prankster is really good just because it lets you get off that move with a priority, so you could just throw out pretty much any kind of non-damaging move without the worry of it failing. So now we get up to the final stage, which is kind of combining all of these things together. And those of you who already know, you know exactly why I'm looking at Tinkatink right now, and you're fixing to see if you don't know. But being able to make the perfect move pool by combining multiple different Pokemon together and then unsplicing them, and then splicing it with something else, and then getting a move from that one, unsplicing it, and then you come up with a good type combination so that, let's say you're immune to Eternatus, who for the most part is the only real threat in Endless, unless you come up against some really weird combination Pokemon that splice together or something. But you get immunity, and then you get a really good ability, like maybe Unnerve or something. And that's when you kind of get into extremely broken combinations that take a lot of, I guess, forethought and setup. But when you're playing for hours and you're going through thousands of waves, you kind of have the time to, kind of theory craft those things. And so I am going to jump over to my Endless run, and we're going to see just how this works against Eternatus at wave 2000. So nothing super duper high, but it's just where I'm at on my current run, and this gives me an excuse to go ahead and beat it. So what we have here is a spliced Tinkatink. Well, I say spliced, but it's kind of a Frankenstein Tinkatink, or Tinkaton. It's been spliced probably like 5 or 6 times at this point. But if you don't know, Eternatus in Endless mode only has Poison and Dragon type moves, so Tinkaton is immune to everything he can do. Which normally is just kind of good on its own, but you don't want to be sitting there chipping at it for 15 hours straight. So what we have here is pretty much all the damage over time moves that you want to have. You've got Leech Seed, Infestation, Soak, Salt Cure, and with these moves, you can basically just kind of set up over 4 turns and then just sit back while he slowly dies. If you happen to have a mini black hole, which I did not put on before this battle, I probably should have done that, but you can also just steal items from him every turn while you're just sitting back doing nothing. And so this isn't a perfectly perfect Tinkaton, because I would like to have it fused with a Corviknight, so that I also have Unnerve to stop him from using berries, and it would just make this laughable. But instead, we're just going to kind of move forward with what we do have, and look at that, I died in 1 turn. Because, gotcha, I did not unsplice. So, this Tinkaton is actually spliced with a Claydol, and I did that just to get some luck moving forward, and I just planned on unsplicing him before the battle. But here I did not do that. And I did it strictly as an example to show of what happens when you don't take a second to think about what you're doing. And you could just lose instantly, because I don't really have a good backup plan at this point. So we are going to do a quick refresh, and then I'll show you how this would actually go if I prepared for a second. So we're back at our wave, we have refreshed the game. Don't at me for cheating, I did that as an example. But we're going to take this Tinkadol, or Tinkadol, I don't know, this weird monstrosity. And you can actually unsplice during battle. So we're going to unsplice it real quick and just lose the Claydol. And so now, we are now Fairy Steel type, which means we shouldn't be able to take any damage. Now, unfortunately, I still don't have a nerve, so this fight's going to take a little bit. And I might speed this part up, just so that way you're not sitting here watching it forever. But let's take a quick look at how this is going to go. And just like that, we were able to kill him with very little effort. And of course, I didn't give myself the mini black hole that I had, so I did lose quite a few items from this, and wasn't able to really steal anything. So that was kind of a mistake on my part. Again, forethought's important. But that's the kind of stuff that you can do if you just spend, a little bit of time thinking about what you're doing moving forward, and you really understand how DNA splicing works. And I'm sure there's more broken combinations out there. So I think that pretty much sums it up. I am sure I probably missed a lot of different points that I could have made. I'm by no means an expert. I just feel like I have a pretty good grasp on it, and I've been getting a lot of questions from people that have wanted to know a little bit more. So this is what you get. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you guys are liking the content and everything, please drop a like and a subscribe. The like and sub really does appreciate it. And if you have any other combinations that you found that are just really good, or if I missed any of your favorites, make sure you drop a comment and let me know. I'm always open to learning new things, and I like trying new stuff on my runs. So if you guys have a really good idea or something, maybe I'll do a live stream of, playing through with it. And you guys could also follow me on Twitch, and then you could watch me try out your idea on live. That'd be really cool. But anyways, I hope to catch you guys later, and yep, that's it. I kept this outro going too long.